like that, and they actually picked up Berkeley. But they also made a couple of other recommendations, some other landscapers that actually the gentleman I talked to over there used to work for Brightview, so he kind of knows both sides of it, and he gave me quite a few names of landscape contractors that do a good job that I could reach out to if we were to put out a proposal and ask them to take a look at it.
Because based on what you said a few minutes ago, your preference is to have a contractor that does the job.
Right.
So
absolutely.
I think that's certainly something we ought to be considering then is going down that road. At the same time, I do think we probably need to have some backstop on our staffing. So I don't know where the balance is. There may be some things that we want to do ourselves, like some of the detail work, as opposed to hiring it all out. So I'm going to throw that out there as another.
Now, funny you should say that. When I presented this a year ago, I actually have a couple other columns which I didn't include in this, which covered hiring some staff to city staff to take care of priority areas, as we called them, or even just the parks, and they just focus on that. It ended up not being cost effective. It was worse than these two options, because that's also a consideration. My preferences aside, if everyone bids and they're much higher than we could do it in house, we need to do what's most cost effective.
How did you come up with 5 full-time staffing personnel as opposed to say 4 or 3 even? I mean, what's the formula you use to decide on 5?
I wish I could say it was a scientific formula. It was more of a consideration of what the city had back in 2011 when we did our own landscaping, keeping in mind that we've taken on a lot more right-of-way in our maintenance, and also entrances. And so I discussed with some of my employees about it and with Greg, and tried to come up with, there's no scientific formula, but as a consideration of all the elements.
Do we know how many hours per month Brightview performs these operations in the city? And if so, do we know how many personnel they bring? And once we know that, we can multiply that out, come up with a number, and then we divide that back up by, say, 40 hours a week. We know exactly how many people we need to cover the same job that they're doing.
So the primary crew that we have with Brightview is a 4-man crew. But very often they'll bring in a second crew to help catch up. And then also some of the areas like Grogan's Mill, Research Forest, Six Pines, that's handled by a separate crew. So I also took that into consideration, because while we have a 4-man crew assigned to us, they don't do everything, and I have seen they've had to bring in extra people to try to catch up.
I bet you that's a number that Brightview has readily available. I bet you if you said, hey, we're trying to see what our return on investment is here. How many man hours did you put in the city of Shenandoah last month? They're gonna know who they had in the city for how many hours, whether it be 1, 2, 3 crews. This crew may have only spent 5 hours. This crew may have spent 20, but they're going to know exactly how many man hours. I think once we get that number, then we can quantify what we would have to have in terms of personnel. And it may not be that we need 5 people, and if we don't need 5 people, and in fact we only need 4, now that option looks a lot more attractive, right? Because now we're shaving $34,000 off of that total cost.
Right, and yeah, I'll definitely ask them for that number. I was just thinking, I know there's some other services that they provide where one person comes in because that's their specialty. They've got a spray that they put on all the cracks and curbs and things, and one person goes around and does that. So, but I can definitely ask them to try to gather that data for me to help in my decision making.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great first step.
What's the contract termination date for Brightview? If we didn't renew them, I guess.
It's a 30-day notice from either party.
Mayor, to your point about checking hours, one of the reasons that it sounds like Joseph has investigated this is because of quality of service. So matching hours for hours isn't going to demonstrate what level of service we want.
No, but it gives us a good idea. It gives us a good ballpark. And they may have spent an hour here but not done an hour's worth of work. Whereas I'm going to assume that Joseph's employees would do an hour's worth of work.
Oh, absolutely.
Joseph, who would these employees report to?
So the field service positions would report to their crew leader, and the crew leader would report to the utilities and maintenance supervisor.
In my experience as a crew leader it's more of like a field crew leader, not so much the full management expectations that the city probably has in terms of doing personnel reviews and the paperwork. It sounds like a lot of that effort would still fall to the utilities and maintenance supervisor.
Right. Some of the things that would set this crew leader apart is because if we were going to take over our own chemical spraying and things like that, there would be certifications they'd have to get, and also if we wanted to do our own irrigation repair, which is why I want to make it a crew leader position, because they're going to have to go a little bit above what the field guys would have to do.
Do you know how many people the utilities and maintenance supervisor currently supervises?
Directly supervises. It's going to be 3 operators and 1 crew leader. So that'd be 4.
How did the total costs get calculated from base salary to total cost?
So that includes an adjustment, I believe it's 22%, just to include all the health and insurance and benefits. The base cost is just the dollar amount of what they're paying us.
I think that's a little short. If you just do 14% for TMRS, you're only left with about $2,000 to cover insurance.
I typically do about 26% because TMRS is actually 17.8%. So I usually do 26%, and that does not include insurance benefits.
So how much is it insurance? I mean, it's hard to. I mean, an employee that makes $60,000, 26% may be good, but an employee that makes 27.
Well,
because
I do
of the
it
insurance
because
cost. Oh, but 26 doesn't cover.
TMRS, payroll taxes. That's where I get the 26%.
Okay. Any idea what a cost to cover an employee is for insurance?
I think I had that.
Just employee.
I'd be interested in kind of a range of between employee, family.
Yeah, I can get that for you. Just give me just a few minutes.
But I mean, my point is, I think that we probably need to take some more time to look at this if we really want to look at taking it in-house. I think the salary or the personnel costs are low. I fully believe if you consider vacation time, holiday time, and in general, I think we're short on people. Mayor, I think your thought that we could go down, I think it's actually, my guess is we should be going up.
I don't have a thought one way or the other. I want to see the data. Yeah. I'm not good at stabbing in the dark.
Yeah, and I was thinking the same thing with the seasonal workers that, at least we do get around some of the benefits.
Yeah, that seems like I mean, if we're worried about the current staff effort to manage the contractor, the management of hiring seasonal workers, I think, is going to be pretty intense. Yeah. Do you remember? I mean, I was obviously here at the time. But do you remember the net employees that we reduced whenever we contracted the service out?
I don't. I seem to think it was about. I don't remember.
My memory is either 4 or 5.
I was thinking 4, but
I think we went from 8 to 3, and then we hired one back as a janitor later. but I think the initial was 8 to 3, which would be a net of 5 employees. And that was before we added a bunch of square footage.